Join me, Lou Diamond, on a new podcast show called Why They Listen, where I sit down with incredible leaders and communicators from different industries, unique platforms, and special programming from across the globe, and take a deeper dive into not only how they communicate, but how they connect and engage audiences, and why those audiences listen. You can find a new episode of Why They Listen wherever you listen to your podcasts, or at Aimcast, AIMECAST.com.
Ladies and gentlemen, I have been to the Great Wall of China. I have seen the pyramids of Egypt. I even witnessed a grown man satisfy a camel. But never in all my years as a sportscaster have I witnessed something as improbable, as impossible as what we've witnessed here today. It's Thrive Loud with Lou Diamond.
A third of the people love you, a third don't care about you, and a third hate you. So you concentrate on the third that love you and you go for it.
I think the greatest Achilles heel for leaders is they don't give themselves time to think.
So my journey is one of those, there are a lot of detours. There's a lot of going off on the side roads.
Thrive Out listeners, you're in for a treat. We're here with Jamal Mashburn, Jesse Itzler,
the John Maxwell,
Jackie the Joke Man Martling, New York Rangers great Mike Richter,
Lisa Lampanelli,
Mary Carrillo.
Oh, how nice.
I'm actually going through the practice of being an entrepreneur.
Pick yourself up, brush yourself off, and thrive loud.
Get ready to thrive loud with Lou Diamond.
I love it.
Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Thrive Loud with Lou Diamond, connecting you to the most inspiring and amazing people that are thriving each and every day. I'm your host, Lou Diamond. Today on Thrive Loud, we have a serial entrepreneur, author, columnist, and podcast host. He has raised billions of dollars for a variety of ventures. He's the president of Kramer Communications, which provides business marketing, financial, and operational plan development and implementation for startups to Fortune 500 companies. He is also the president of Stress-Free Family Business, where he trains the next generation, develops process and plans to grow the family business. From sports writer to serial entrepreneur to college professor to podcast host. Thrive Loud listeners, Marc Kramer. Marc, how are you today?
Lou, thank you so much for having me on your show.
You've got a lot of things going on. You're a busy man from all different aspects every single day here. I love this story. I want to hear that this flow of how you got into the world that you're in, specifically all these venture opportunities. Maybe you can give that brief, fast version of your history, kind of like hitting the rewind and then the fast forward and play button at the same time.
Sure. I came from a family of business owners, and I was going to be a career sports writer, and I wrote for 5 years, and I said, I never want to be in business because of all the hours my father worked and my grandfather worked. And then I got married and realized I couldn't afford the life that I wanted us to be accustomed to. So I started different ventures to make side money, and that's how I became a serial entrepreneur. It wasn't like people who go to school to become entrepreneurs or dreamed of building some great business. I never had those dreams. My dream was to cover the Phillies and write for Sports Illustrated. That was my big dream.
First of all, I want to talk about the hours that your families had worked. What industries were they in? That were they their own business owners, or they worked for other people? What was that like?
No, my family had been in business for themselves since the beginning of the last century.
Wow.
And so my grandfather owned a luncheonette in the town I grew up in called Coatesville. Mm-hmm. And the luncheonette was across from one of the gates at Luke and Steel, a big steel company. And then my father and grandfather had started a wholesale drug business, which is not what you think. It's toothpaste and that type of thing. And then my father started a medical equipment business, and he did that until he retired. And I watched them get up really early in the morning and work till late, and half days on Saturdays. In my grandfather's case, it was 7 days a week. And I thought, this is insane. Why would I want to do that? I just want to sit at the ballpark and watch people hit baseballs and football and basketball. And I particularly love boxing. I've seen over 500 live fights in boxing.
So this is interesting, though. You found a way that you needed to make money, and obviously helping with all these small ventures. Many of my listeners who have run different companies know that when you're running your own venture, it's a lot of work. Was this a matter of enjoying the work that you were doing or putting in the time, or do you have a master efficiency plan on how to get involved with things, but at the pace that you'd like to?
Well, the thing I found about entrepreneurship was I actually was an entrepreneur very early on. I'd always been creating stuff to sell. And then when I was in high school, I took over the high school newspaper and turned it for the first time in 80 plus years into a profit. And then when I was in college, I created a bumper sticker business and sold bumper stickers. So I always liked the idea of creation.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what intrigues me about entrepreneurship. And I've run and started over 25 different ventures, and I've raised, as you mentioned in the beginning, a lot of money for these different ventures. And I started the country's first formally organized investor angel network, the Pennsylvania Private Investors Group, in 1990. And now it's called the Private Investors Forum. And so I like the creative aspects of starting a business, writing the plan, getting it launched. And then I kind of lose a little bit of interest once it's up and running and I'm ready to start the next thing.
So this is interesting, though. These businesses that you're helping, what's the biggest challenge that you see today? Because we're in a different world today since COVID has hit, and a lot of these startup and early stage companies are dealing with that. And since you have a foot in the ground or a grasp of a lot of these businesses, from your purview, what are you seeing as some of the biggest challenges those companies are facing?
Well, I think right now is actually a great time to start a company. Every time you have a dip in the economy, it's a good time to start a venture. But I think the biggest problem for entrepreneurs they're having is actually meeting face-to-face with investors. It's very difficult to get people to part with their money unless they can physically see you and be close to you and spend time with you. So I think that's the biggest problem that they have. Not that they can't go and start a business and scale it up. I mean, if you took a look at Zoom, my gosh, that's become a verb now. And that guy was a vice president at Cisco, and they turned down the concept of Zoom because they had something already. And now this guy's worth $11 billion. So there's plenty of opportunity, but the hardest part for these entrepreneurs is it's always hard raising capital under the best of circumstances, but harder now because you can't physically get in front of your potential investor.
I want to talk about this writing skill because you're helping these companies, obviously, from an entrepreneurial investor side, and you have a good purview from that. The writing aspect, you do like to write, do you not?
I do. I've written 6 books. I write a national comp for American City Business Journals, and I've been literally writing my whole life. I kind of knew I had some skill at it when I won the 5th grade writing competition. So that made me think, well, maybe I have some skill here. And then I wrote in the high school paper, the college paper, and was a journalism major.
You've also somehow managed to become a podcast host between all the things that you're doing here. Were you enjoying it?
Oh, I love it. As you know, I started because I interviewed you on it, called The Best Business Minds, where I interviewed business book authors. And I kind of just did it for fun in March when COVID hit and everybody was locked down. I thought with the entrepreneurs that I deal with, maybe it would be helpful to them and keep them focused if I interviewed business book authors and they talked about their research and about their books. And after I did the first one, I did it like on 24 hours notice. I asked a Harvard professor named Dr. Laura Hung, who wrote a book called Edge, which is about how to overcome difficult circumstances. And I said, Laura, would you be willing to do this with me? And she said, when? In 24 hours. And so we sent out an email and we had 75 people sign up in 2 hours and over 170 by the time we actually got on. And after the show was over, people asked me when I was doing the next. And now I have people from 30 countries listening to that podcast.
Stress-free family business. I now get the stress-free part, as our listeners do too, because stress is something you just don't like to deal with. And obviously you came from family business entrepreneurs, I guess, who've had that hardworking piece. So I guess you've now taken this, there's no way in the world I'm going to do what they did. And you look at other families and businesses and maybe try and help them figure out how they can grow and live that stress-free family business life?
Well, yeah, the reason I call it stress-free family business, which anybody in family business knows that's kind of an oxymoron, right? Because anytime you're with your family, no matter how wonderful they are, it's very stressful. What I wanted to do was, because I saw this with the family businesses, was the parents wanted to be able to have Thanksgiving, Christmas, Hanukkah, family events together without everybody killing each other or not talking to each other. I mean, that was their ultimate goal, was to make sure that the family stayed intact. And how were we going to do that? And so I would help them and help them now develop plans and even contracts among the family members about how they're going to handle disputes. And the funny thing is, in that business, is the more successful the business, the more difficult it is to keep them all together. You would think it would be the opposite, like when things are rough, that they would, people would be running in different directions or pointing fingers. But no, when it's rough, they pull together. But when things are good, they're all trying to grab their piece of the power or tell the parents that, they're no longer needed in the business. And so it becomes ugly. I mean, I've seen a lot of family businesses that ended up in lawsuits and ended up breaking up the family business.
When breaking up the families too, which is also
the
hard part.
100%. Yeah.
This is interesting. I love people who have these multiple hats and they're able to utilize this energy that you have and bounce things around, which really enables people to keep thriving because you're moving onward and upward. I imagine there are tough days, Mark, that you have, which things aren't kicking on all cylinders. On those days when you're not thriving, who or what practice do you seek to get yourself back on the thriving track?
Well, what I do is, and I found out even in college that I needed to do a lot of things at one time where I fixated on the one thing and did not do it well. And so when I'm having a bad day, I actually think of what we went through with my oldest daughter, who almost didn't make it. Now she's super successful, globally successful. But my oldest daughter had a health issue and she had to have multiple operations within a week of her being born. And every time I'm having a bad day, I think to myself, how bad a day is it, considering what I went through with her? And I also have a friend who is a Holocaust survivor who survived 2 camps and watched her whole family be murdered. And not only did her family be murdered, but she married another Holocaust survivor, had 4 sons. And years later, the husband and one of her sons each died in car accidents 6 months apart. And I'd think, okay, if she can have a positive attitude every day after what she's gone through, what am I complaining about?
Perspective is such a wonderful thing every now and then, right? When we get out of our own head and we check out everything else that's out there. I'm going to do the admin part of the show a little bit early here because you have a lot of things going on. Why don't you share with the listeners? You've got a lot of places where people can find you, websites, podcasts, you've got activities and even events happening in your angel business. Let's do that now so we can then have more fun toward the wrap-up part of the show here. So share with the listeners all the places people can find you. We'll put it in the show notes, but it always gets more engagement when they hear it from you.
So if you're really interested in hearing thought-provoking business book authors like Lou, go to thebestbusinessminds.com and just write to us and we'll put you on our email list. And even if you can't make the show, you'll get the link for the show. So, and all the shows are posted there as well. And if you're an entrepreneur who's looking to raise capital, well, go to theangelventurefair.com and you can apply to the Angel Venture Family. Right now, we're going to be running our big event the next 2 weeks online, virtually. But in December, we start taking applications again. And of course, if you're a family business that needs help and wants to make sure you don't kill each other, go to stressfreefamilybusiness.com. And if you're a company that needs help developing business plans, marketing plans, sales plans, innovation plans, and helping implement those, go to kramercommunications.com. And, it sounds crazy because I have so many things simultaneously going, but I'm able to compartmentalize all of them and I function better. In fact, one time I raised $3.2 billion in a venture. And the lead investor told the chairman I reported to, you got to let him run a few different things at one time so he can stay focused on yours. Because if he only does the one, he's not very good at, but if he's doing a lot of things simultaneously, he's very good at it.
That is a spectacular thing. You have mastered the art. That compartmentalization piece that you just described is perfect, because I was trying to say, how are you doing all these things? But maybe that's how your brain works. You need to be constantly moving.
It is. Yeah, it's crazy.
And that's why you thrive, Mark. So that's great stuff. All right, permission to go down Fun Street here, because one of these topics is going to take a little longer than most. First of all, I want you to share with the listeners what you shared with me was your all-time favorite movie.
Oh, easily The Godfather. I probably watched that like 20 times. So I love it, and that's because I've actually met real live Godfathers. I met Angelo Bruno, who was on the original commission, and my grandfather drove for the Head of Murder Incorporated for 2 years.
You have a real close tie to that. And obviously, being also a boxing fan might have even overlapped a couple of places here or there from the fights.
Yeah, I've seen, as I mentioned, 500 live fights, and I've seen amazing fighters. And I do like boxing, and I boxed a bit just for the exercise.
Okay, which now brings me to a question that I have to ask Mark. You reside in the Philadelphia area. You are a sports fan. You've seen over 500 boxing matches. How is it that Rocky isn't your favorite movie?
I should have maybe put that up there, because I'm literally a stone's throw from the Rocky statue. And aside from COVID, people visit that statue all day, every day, 365 days of the year, and line up to take their picture with Rocky. I think it's the next to the love statue that we have, like these letters, love. It's the second most photographed thing in Philadelphia, and I think it's 12 million people a year get their photograph there in a normal year. So
sidetrack conversation here. I had a conversation with someone that works over at Facebook on the Instagram development team, and they have the ability, obviously, to scan through tons of pictures, and there's a lot of that geotagging that goes on, like where people say they take a picture or not. So they were looking at certain recommendations and things, and the arms up in the air, they actually were able to recognize that people in Philadelphia seem to raise their arms up in the air more than anything else. And that's because so many photos and so many Instagram pictures and Facebook pictures, for that matter, have been taken right where you're a stone's throw away from, which I always find to be so true, because that's what everybody does. They get up there and they pretend they're Rocky, which is pretty neat, right?
What's kind of interesting about that is that I have looking to start the Rocky Art Alliance, which would have people who have their picture taken with Rocky just donate money. And we were going to create a summer camp for kids that from that money, the kids would do both art and entrepreneurship. And so I've been working with the city of Philadelphia on that. And obviously we put it on hold because there's no tourism in Philadelphia right now. But I went to the city and I said, we should really monetize this, because there's so many people that are coming through, and I'm sure that we could probably raise $1 million a year just from people taking their picture at the Rocky statue.
You do have this compartmentalized way of thinking about things. I love it. It's a great way to highlight what you do best. Okay, so Mark, this is going to be like a speed round thing. I'm going to ask you a certain question. I want the first thing that comes to your mind that makes you feel good, pumps you up, lifts you up, whatever it might be. Ready to take this on?
Absolutely. Go ahead.
Okay, a song that you love that lifts you up.
Oh, Frank Sinatra's New York, New York.
Favorite food that isn't a dessert?
Cheesesteaks.
Favorite dessert?
Chocolate cake with chocolate icing and a lot of it.
Mark, an activity you wish you did more of?
Biking.
An activity you wish you did less of?
Sleeping.
Really? If you could,
I sleep 5.5 hours a day. I kind of feel like I'm wasting time.
Oh my goodness. If you could snap your fingers and go anywhere, where are you?
China.
Thrive Loud listeners, a man who we're going to have to give some interesting music as we pump this show out. Marc Kramer, truly a pleasure to have you on Thrive Loud. Continue doing what you're doing every day. I think this is great. We'll put all the links in the show notes. A lot of fun to catch up with you. Thank you so much for coming on the program.
Thank you so much for having me.
And to all our listeners out there, thank you for joining us. Until next time, keep thriving onward and upward. And remember, be brief, be bright, be gone.
You've been listening to Thrive Loud with your host, Lou Diamond. Check us out on the web at thriveloud.com and follow us on Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, and Facebook at Thrive Loud. And check us out on the Good Pods app at Thrive Loud, where you can follow, listen, and connect directly to Lou and all of the Thrive Loud episodes. Thanks for listening.